The weight of midnight. Nina Castellano pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the skyscraper window, watching the city lights blur through her exhausted tears. It was 2:47 a.m., and she had been scrubbing floors for 7 hours straight. Her knees ached, her hands were raw from chemicals, and her heart felt like it might shatter at any moment. 7 years old, that's all Sophie was. 7 years old and fighting for her life in a hospital bed, while Nina pushed a mop across marble floors that cost more than her entire year's salary. The irony wasn't lost on her. She cleaned buildings where people made decisions worth millions, while she couldn't afford the treatment that might save her daughter's life. The leukemia diagnosis had come 6 months ago, turning Nina's world into a nightmare of hospital visits, insurance denials, and mounting debt. Her ex-husband had vanished the moment things got difficult, leaving her alone to face the impossible. 3 jobs: morning receptionist, afternoon waitress, night janitor, barely kept Sophie in experimental treatments that insurance refused to cover. Tonight had been particularly brutal. Sophie's fever had spiked that afternoon, and Nina had left her with their elderly neighbor, Grace, promising to call every hour. Each phone call was a tiny lifeline, Grace's reassuring voice telling her Sophie was sleeping, Sophie was stable, Sophie was asking for mommy. Nina wiped her eyes and returned to her cart. The executive floor wouldn't clean itself, and she needed this job, needed all her jobs. One mistake, one complaint, and she'd be replaced by someone younger, faster, more desperate. The city was full of people like her, hanging on by their fingernails. The man in the shadows. Owen Blackwood adjusted his maintenance uniform and pushed the supply cart down the corridor, nodding at Nina as he passed. She barely glanced at him, just another face in the invisible army of workers who kept the building functioning while executives slept in comfortable beds. That's exactly what Owen wanted. For 3 weeks, he'd been working undercover in his own building, a decision that had shocked his board of directors. But Owen had grown tired of quarterly reports and sanitized presentations. He wanted to know the truth about the people who worked for Blackwood Industries, the people whose labor built his wealth. What he'd discovered disturbed him. Workers pushed to exhaustion for minimum wage, supervisors who treated people like replaceable parts, a culture of fear where no one dared speak up about problems because termination was one complaint away. He'd built an empire, but at what cost? Nina interested him particularly. She worked harder than anyone else, never complained, and carried a sadness in her eyes that reminded him of his own mother years ago. His mother, who had worked herself to death in factories and cleaning jobs, trying to give Owen opportunities she'd never had. He owed everything to her sacrifice. Yet somehow, he'd created a company that treated people just like she'd been treated. Tonight, Owen was determined to learn Nina's story.
The mistake. It happened at 3:15 a.m. Nina was emptying trash in the executive conference room when her phone vibrated. Grace's number. Her heart stopped. Grace never called unless something was wrong. "Nina?" Grace's voice was strained. "Sophie's fever is 104. I think we need to take her to the emergency room." Nina's hands shook. "I'm coming. I'm leaving right now." She abandoned her cart and ran for the elevator, forgetting the conference room door was still unlocked, forgetting she hadn't finished her rounds, forgetting everything except her daughter who needed her. The elevator seemed to take forever. Nina pressed the button repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Please let Sophie be okay. Please. She couldn't lose her daughter. She couldn't. The doors finally opened on the ground floor, where she nearly collided with David Torres, the night supervisor. His eyes narrowed as he took in her tear-stained face and the direction she'd come from. "Castellano, did you finish the executive floor?" I have to go," my daughter. Your shift doesn't end for 2 more hours. Torres's voice was cold. You know the policy. Please, Nina's voice broke. She has cancer. She's 7 years old, and she has cancer, and her fever is 104, and I need to get to her. Torres's expression didn't soften. Everyone has problems, Castellano. You leave now, you're abandoning your shift. That's grounds for termination. Nina felt the world spinning. She needed this job. The insurance it provided, meager as it was, covered some of Sophie's medications. Without it, she couldn't afford even the basic treatments. But Sophie needed her now. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please don't fire me. I have a sick child. I just need to... Policy is policy. Torres reached for his radio. I'll need to call this in. The intervention. That won't be necessary. A quiet voice came from behind them. Both Nina and Torres turned to see Owen, still in his maintenance uniform, stepping out of the shadows. He'd been restocking supplies in the supply closet and had heard everything. This doesn't concern you, maintenance, Torres snapped. Get back to work. Owen pulled out his phone and made a show of checking it. Actually, I think HR would be very interested to know you're threatening to fire a single mother for leaving to care for her critically ill child. That's exactly the kind of publicity our company loves, isn't it? Torres's face reddened. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who knows that threatening apologies during family emergencies violates about 6 different labor laws. Owen turned to Nina, his voice gentle. Go. Your daughter needs you. Your job will be here when you get back. You can't promise that, Torres sputtered. Actually, I can, Owen said quietly. But we can discuss that later. Right now, Miss Castellano needs to leave. Nina stared at the stranger who had just defended her, tears still streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. She ran for the exit, her mind already focused on Sophie. Behind her, she heard Torres beginning to argue with the mysterious maintenance worker, but she didn't stop. Sophie was all that mattered. The investigation. Owen watched Nina disappear into the night, then turned his full attention to Torres. The supervisor's aggressive posture faltered slightly under Owen's steady gaze. Let me make something very clear, Owen said softly. Ms. Castellano will not be penalized for leaving tonight. In fact, you're going to log her hours as if she completed her full shift. Understood? You can't tell me how to do my job, Torres protested, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. I'll be in touch with HR first thing Monday morning. We're going to review how supervisors handle family emergencies. I suspect some policy changes are overdue. He walked away before Torres could respond, his mind racing. Nina's situation represented everything wrong with his company. She was working herself into the ground, sacrificing her health and time with her dying daughter just to afford treatments that should be accessible to everyone. Owen had built his wealth partly on the backs of workers like Nina. The realization made him feel sick. He made his way to the security office, where he knew the night guard Henry kept his station. Henry looked up in surprise as Owen entered. Need something? Information about Nina Castellano. How long has she worked here? What do you know about her situation? Henry leaned back in his chair, studying Owen with curious eyes. Nina? She's been here about 8 months. Never misses a shift, works harder than anyone. Got a little girl with cancer. Real tragedy. Grace Miller lives in her building. She watches the kid when Nina's working. Nina's got 2 other jobs too, morning and afternoon before she comes here. 3 jobs, Owen murmured. And still can't afford treatment? Insurance doesn't cover experimental treatments. Kid's in a clinical trial now, but it costs money Nina doesn't have. I've seen her eating vending machine dinners in the break room, saving every penny. Henry shook his head. She's one of the good ones. Doesn't complain, doesn't cause trouble, just works and hopes. Owen felt anger building in his chest, not at Nina, but at himself, at a system that forced parents to choose between being with their dying children and keeping the jobs that might save them.
The hospital vigil. Nina burst through the emergency room doors, her cleaning uniform still on, her hands still smelling of industrial cleaner. The nurse at the desk recognized her immediately. They'd seen each other too many times over the past 6 months. "Room 7, the nurse said gently. "Dr. Hayes is with her now." Nina ran down the hallway, her heart pounding. Room 7's door was partially open, and she could see Grace sitting in a chair beside a small bed where Sophie lay, looking impossibly tiny and fragile. "Mommy?" Sophie's voice was weak, but she smiled when she saw Nina. "Baby, I'm here." Nina rushed to the bedside, taking Sophie's small hand in hers. Her daughter's skin was burning hot. "Mommy's here now." Dr. Rebecca Hayes looked up from her tablet, her expression professionally calm, but her eyes showing concern. "Her fever spiked suddenly. We're running tests, but I suspect the latest round of treatment is affecting her immune system. We'll need to keep her here for observation." "How long?" Nina asked, already calculating how many shifts she'd miss, how much money she'd lose. "At least 48 hours, possibly longer." Dr. Hayes paused. "Nina, we need to talk about the next phase of treatment." Those words. Nina had learned to dread them. Next phase always meant more experimental procedures, more medications insurance wouldn't cover, more debt she couldn't escape. "There's a new immunotherapy that's showing remarkable results. It could significantly improve Sophie's prognosis, but it's expensive," Nina finished, her voice flat. "The trial protocol requires a $50,000 deposit to secure placement. I've been trying to get grants, but..." $50,000. Nina made $32,000 a year across all 3 jobs. $50,000 might as well be $50 million. "How long do we have to decide?" Nina asked, stroking Sophie's hair. 2 weeks. After that, the trial enrollment closes." Nina nodded, not trusting herself to speak. 2 weeks to find money she'd never have. 2 weeks before the door closed on her daughter's best chance at survival. Grace squeezed Nina's shoulder gently. The elderly woman had become like family over these terrible months. "We'll figure something out, sweetheart. We always do." But Nina could see in Grace's eyes that even she didn't believe it this time. The decision. At 6 a.m., Owen Blackwood sat in his real office on the top floor of his building, watching the sunrise over the city. He'd changed out of his maintenance uniform and into one of his usual suits, but he felt different somehow, changed by what he'd witnessed tonight. His phone buzzed. His assistant, surprised to find him in so early on a Saturday. "I need you to pull personnel files. Nina Castellano, night janitor. And I need contact information for every employee in the building who has family members with serious medical conditions." "Sir." "Also, schedule an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. We're implementing immediate policy changes." "What kind of changes?" Owen thought about Nina's desperate whisper, "Please don't fire me. I have a sick child." He thought about his mother, who died of a heart attack at 52 after working 3 jobs for 30 years. He thought about all the people invisible in his building, struggling in silence while he counted his billions. "We're creating a medical emergency fund. $50 million to start. Any employee facing catastrophic medical expenses for themselves or immediate family members can apply for grants. Full coverage, no repayment required." His assistant was silent for a moment. That's very generous, sir." "It's not generous," Owen corrected. "It's the bare minimum of decent. Also, I want our HR policies reviewed. No employee should ever be threatened with termination for leaving work to care for a sick child. I'll arrange everything." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, what prompted this?" Owen looked out at the city where millions of people were waking up to face their own struggles. I remembered why I built this company in the first place, and I realized I'd lost sight of the only thing that actually matters. He ended the call and pulled up Nina's personnel file on his computer. Single mother, 3 jobs, daughter with leukemia. In the photo attached to her file, she was smiling, but Owen could see the exhaustion in her eyes. On Monday, he'd reveal his true identity. He'd implement the changes his company desperately needed. But first, he needed to make one more stop.
The Sunday morning visit. Nina hadn't slept in 36 hours. She sat beside Sophie's hospital bed, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall, counting each breath like precious currency. The fever had broken around dawn, and Sophie had finally fallen into peaceful sleep. Dr. Hayes had been cautiously optimistic, but the underlying message remained clear. Without the new treatment, they were only buying time. Grace had gone home to rest, promising to return with fresh clothes and Sophie's favorite stuffed rabbit. The hospital room felt both too large and too small, empty except for the monitors beeping their steady rhythm, yet suffocating with the weight of impossible decisions. Nina's phone buzzed. A text from David Torres. Need to discuss your employment status. Report to my office, Monday, 8 a.m. Her stomach dropped. Despite what the mysterious maintenance worker had said, Torres clearly intended to follow through with termination. She'd abandoned her shift. In Torres's world, rules mattered more than reasons. She was about to put her phone away when another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. Miss Castellano, this is Owen Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries. I need to speak with you regarding an urgent matter. I'm downstairs in the hospital lobby. No pressure, but this concerns Sophie's treatment. Owen. Nina's hands started shaking. The CEO? Why would the CEO of the company contact her directly? And how did he even know about Sophie? Unless the maintenance worker. Had he reported her somehow? Was this about her leaving work? But he'd mentioned Sophie's treatment. That made no sense. With one last glance at her sleeping daughter, Nina stood and made her way to the elevator. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman she barely recognized, gaunt, exhausted, wearing 2-days-old clothes that still smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. She tried to smooth her hair, then gave up. It didn't matter what she looked like. If they were firing her, at least she'd face it standing up. The truth revealed. Owen stood in the hospital lobby, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first corporate presentation decades ago. He'd faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, and boardroom battles without flinching, but the thought of facing Nina Castellano made his palms sweat. He'd spent Saturday researching her situation thoroughly. The personnel file had been just the beginning. He'd learned about her ex-husband who'd abandoned them, about Sophie's diagnosis and the brutal reality of pediatric leukemia, about the experimental treatment that could save Sophie's life but cost more than Nina would earn in 2 years, about the 3 jobs, the mounting debt, the quiet desperation of a mother who would sacrifice anything for her child. He'd also pulled Torres's file and found a pattern of complaints from employees about his rigid, heartless management style. That situation would be handled Monday morning. But right now, Owen needed to face the woman whose situation had cracked open something in his carefully controlled world. The elevator doors opened, and Nina stepped out. She looked terrible, exhausted, frightened, defiant, and something in Owen's chest tightened at the sight of her. This was what his corporate policies created. People pushed beyond human limits, parents forced to choose between jobs and children. Miss Castellano. He stepped forward, keeping his voice gentle. "Thank you for coming down." Nina's eyes widened in recognition. "You're the maintenance worker? From Friday night?" "Not exactly." He gestured to a quiet corner with chairs. "Can we sit? I have a lot to explain." Nina followed warily, perching on the edge of the chair like she might need to run at any moment. "Are you firing me? Because if you are, I'd appreciate it if you just said it. I need to get back to my daughter." "I'm not firing you. Nina, may I call you Nina?" At her cautious nod, he continued, "I'm Owen Blackwood. I own Blackwood Industries, but for the past 3 weeks, I've been working undercover in my own building as a maintenance worker." Nina stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I needed to see the truth about how my company operates, how we treat the people who work for us." Owen leaned forward, his expression earnest. "And what I found was unacceptable. People working multiple jobs and still struggling. Supervisors threatening termination over family emergencies. A culture where employees are treated as disposable." "Okay," Nina said slowly, still not understanding why he was telling her this. "But what does this have to do with me?" "Everything." Owen pulled out his phone and showed her a document. "Friday night, I witnessed David Torres threatening to fire you for leaving to care for your critically ill daughter. That violation of basic human decency crystallized everything wrong with my company. But more than that, learning about your situation, about Sophie, made me realize how far I drifted from the values my mother taught me." Nina's eyes filled with tears at the mention of Sophie. "Please, Mr. Blackwood, I can't lose this job. The insurance—" "You're not losing your job," Owen interrupted gently. "In fact, I'm offering you a new one. But first, I need to tell you about something I'm implementing starting Monday." He pulled up another document on his phone. "I'm creating the Blackwood Medical Emergency Fund. $50 million to start, with more allocated annually. Any employee or their immediate family member facing catastrophic medical expenses can apply for grants covering full treatment costs. No repayment required." Nina shook her head, not understanding. That's wonderful for your employees, but I'm just a janitor. I don't—" "You are an employee, and Sophie qualifies for immediate assistance. The $50,000 deposit for her immunotherapy trial? Covered. All subsequent treatment costs? Covered. Any experimental procedures Dr. Hayes recommends? Covered." The words didn't seem to register at first. Nina just stared at him, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with shock. I don't understand. Why would you do this?" The memory of a mother. Owen was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "My mother was a factory worker. Single parent, like you. My father left when I was 3. She worked 3 jobs, too. Manufacturing plant during the day, cleaning office buildings at night, weekend shifts at a laundromat. She did whatever it took to keep food on the table and send me to decent schools." Nina listened, seeing this powerful man in a completely different light. "She died when I was 24 years old," Owen continued. "Heart attack. The doctor said it was from years of stress and exhaustion. Her body just gave out. She was 52 years old." He looked up, meeting Nina's eyes. "She sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities she never had. And I used those opportunities to build an empire. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the empire was built on the labor of people just like her. People just like you." A tear rolled down Nina's cheek. "I'm sorry about your mother." "She would be ashamed of the company I built," Owen said bluntly. "Of the way we treat our workers. Of the fact that someone like you has to work 3 jobs and still can't afford to save your daughter's life." He leaned forward, intensity in his eyes. "But I can change that, starting with you and Sophie. I can't accept charity.
even though every cell in my body was screaming to accept, to grab this lifeline with both hands. It's not charity, Owen said firmly. It's justice. Nina, you work for me. You're part of Blackwood Industries. This company makes billions in profit annually. The fact that we haven't been taking care of our employees' medical needs is a failure of leadership. My failure. This fund is me correcting that mistake. Nina's hands were shaking. You're serious? You'll really pay for Sophie's treatment? Every penny. And I'm offering you a new position, Director of Employee Welfare. Salary of $85,000 annually, full benefits, reasonable hours so you can be with Sophie during her treatment. Your job would be to help me redesign our employees' support programs. Who better to create policies that actually help working families than someone who's lived that struggle? I'm not qualified for that kind of position. I never finished college. I'm a janitor. You're a mother who's been fighting an impossible battle with courage and dignity, Owen corrected. You understand what employees need because you've lived it. That's worth more than any business degree. Besides, we'll provide training and support. But Nina, I need your perspective. I need someone who will tell me when policies don't work for real people living real lives. Nina pressed her hands to her face, unable to stop the tears now. This is really happening? This isn't some kind of cruel joke? Owen pulled out a folder he'd been holding. This is really happening. Here's the paperwork for Sophie's treatment fund. It's already been sent to Dr. Hayes. And here's the employment contract for your new position. Take time to read everything. Consult a lawyer if you want. But Nina, I need you to understand something. Owen waited until she lowered her hands and looked at him. You're not broken. You're not a failure because you couldn't afford Sophie's treatment on your own. The system is broken. A system that forces parents to choose between being with their sick children and keeping their jobs is fundamentally wrong. You've been surviving in an unjust system, but we're going to change that system together.
The hospital room. Owen insisted on walking Nina back to Sophie's room. Along the way, they passed Dr. Hayes in the corridor. The doctor's eyes widened when she recognized Owen. Apparently, billionaire CEOs visiting pediatric oncology wards made an impression. Dr. Hayes, Owen said, extending his hand, Owen Blackwood, I believe you'll be receiving authorization for Sophie Castellano's immunotherapy trial. Dr. Hayes glanced at Nina, who nodded through her tears. Yes, it came through about an hour ago. Mr. Blackwood, this treatment could save Sophie's life. I don't know how to thank you. Thank Nina, Owen said. She's the one who made me remember what matters. How soon can Sophie start the trial? As soon as she's stabilized from this fever spike, probably within the week. Dr. Hayes's professional composure cracked slightly, revealing genuine joy. Sophie's a fighter. With this treatment, her prognosis improves dramatically. Owen nodded, feeling something warm expand in his chest. This was why wealth existed, not to accumulate, but to change lives. They continued to Sophie's room. The little girl was awake now, her large eyes curious, as she watched her mother enter with a strange man in an expensive suit. "Mommy, who's that?" Sophie's voice was weak but curious. Nina sat on the edge of the bed, taking Sophie's hand. "Baby, this is Mr. Blackwood. He's gonna help you get better." "Like a superhero?" And Owen laughed despite himself. "Not quite a superhero, but I'm gonna make sure you get the best medicine so you can grow up strong and healthy. How does that sound?" Sophie smiled, a fragile expression that nearly broke Owen's heart. "Will it make my hair grow back?" "The doctors will do everything they can. And when you're all better, maybe you and your mom can come visit my office. I have a whole floor full of toys and games." "Really?" Sophie's eyes lit up. "Really?" Owen stood, looking at Nina. I'll let you two have some privacy. Nina, read the contracts. Call me with any questions, but most importantly, be with your daughter. That's all that matters right now." As he turned to leave, Nina called out, "Mr. Blackwood? Owen?" He turned back. "Thank you," Nina whispered. "You're saving her life. I'll never be able to repay you." "You already have," Owen said simply. "You reminded me why I do this, why any of this matters." The Monday morning revolution. Monday morning, Owen stood before his board of directors and senior management team. The conference room was tense. He'd called the emergency meeting with no explanation, and rumors had been flying all weekend. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been working undercover in our building as a maintenance worker. Some of you knew this, most didn't. What I discovered was unacceptable." He pulled up slides showing employee statistics, turnover rates, salary comparisons with cost of living, complaints filed with HR about supervisor conduct. "We have employees working multiple jobs just to survive. We have supervisors threatening termination over family emergencies. We have a culture that treats people as disposable resources rather than human beings." Owen's voice was hard. "This ends today." Over the next hour, he outlined sweeping changes: the medical emergency fund, increased minimum wages for all employees, mandatory supervisor training on empathy and crisis management, flexible scheduling for parents and caregivers, mental health resources, educational assistance programs. These changes will cost approximately $200 million annually. Our profit margin will decrease by approximately 2.5%. I expect some of you will object to this. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "Let me be clear," Owen continued. "This is not up for debate. These changes are happening. If anyone here believes profit matters more than the people who generate that profit, you're welcome to tender your resignation, effective immediately." The room was silent. "Good," Owen said. "Now let's discuss implementation. And I want to introduce you to someone." He gestured to the door where Nina stood, nervously, in a new professional outfit Owen had arranged to be delivered to her apartment that morning. "This is Nina Castellano, our new Director of Employee Welfare. She'll be leading these initiatives. I expect full cooperation from all departments." Nina stepped forward, her hands shaking slightly, but her voice steady as she addressed the room. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood, and thank you all for this opportunity. I'm here because 6 months ago, my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia, and I discovered that working 3 jobs wasn't enough to save her life. The system failed me, and it's failing thousands of other employees across this company. Together, we're going to fix that." 3 months later, Sophie Castellano sat in the hospital playroom, her head covered with the soft fuzz of new hair growth. The immunotherapy was working beyond Dr. Hayes's most optimistic projections. Her cancer markers were dropping steadily, and her energy was returning. Nina watched through the observation window, tears of joy streaming down her face. Grace stood beside her, squeezing her hand. "She's gonna make it," Grace whispered. "Your baby's gonna make it." "Because of Owen," Nina said softly. She'd started calling him Owen after he'd insisted, though it still felt strange sometimes. "Because he cared enough to see us, really see us." Owen had become a regular presence in their lives over the past months. He visited Sophie at least once a week, bringing books and toys, telling terrible jokes that made the little girl laugh. He'd helped Nina navigate her new role at Blackwood Industries, supporting her as she implemented programs that were already changing hundreds of lives. But it was more than professional. Somewhere between hospital visits and late-night conversations about changing corporate culture, a genuine friendship had developed. Maybe something more, though neither had acknowledged it yet. "Speak of the devil," Grace murmured, as Owen appeared down the hallway carrying a large wrapped present. He spotted them and smiled, that genuine expression so different from the cold businessman he'd been months ago. "How's our girl today?" "Thriving," Nina said, full of wonder. "Dr. Hayes says if this progress continues, Sophie could be in full remission within 6 months. That's incredible." Owen set down the present and did something unexpected. He pulled Nina into a brief, warm hug. "I'm so happy for you both." Nina didn't pull away. Instead, she let herself lean into the embrace for a moment, drawing strength from this man who'd become so important to her. When they separated, Grace was smiling knowingly. "I'll go play with Sophie," she said tactfully. "Give you two a moment." When she'd gone, Owen and Nina stood together, watching Sophie laugh as Grace produced a deck of cards from her purse. "I've been thinking," Owen said quietly, "about how all of this started. That night when Torres threatened you, when you whispered, 'Please don't fire me, I have a sick child.' That moment changed everything for me." "It changed everything for me too," Nina admitted. "You could have walked away, stayed hidden. But you didn't."
"I couldn't," Owen said simply. "You reminded me of my mother, of everything she sacrificed, everything she endured. And I realized that I'd built my success on the backs of people like her, like you, without ever really seeing the cost." Nina turned to face him fully. "You did more than see us. You changed your entire company culture. Do you know how many employees have reached out to thank me? How many lives you've transformed?" "We've transformed," Owen corrected. "Nina, the programs you've implemented are brilliant. The employee support network, the flexible scheduling, the mental health initiatives, that's all you. You took your pain and turned it into something that's helping thousands of people." "Because you gave me the chance," Nina said. "Because you didn't see a janitor. You saw a person worth investing in." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Sophie play. "Nina," Owen said, finally, his voice uncertain in a way she'd never heard him before, "this is probably completely inappropriate given our working relationship, but I need to say it. These past months, getting to know you and Sophie, watching you fight for your daughter and for our employees, I've developed feelings for you. Real feelings that go beyond friendship or professional respect." Nina's breath caught. She'd felt it too, the growing connection between them, but had been afraid to acknowledge it. The power dynamic, the difference in their backgrounds, the complications, there were 1,000 reasons to stay silent. But life was short. Sophie's illness had taught her that. And sometimes the most unexpected connections were the truest. "I feel it too," she admitted quietly. "And you're right. It's complicated. But Owen, you've given me my daughter's life back. You've given me a career I never dreamed possible. You've shown me that kindness still exists in this world. How could I not develop feelings for you?" Owen smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face. "So where do we go from here?" "Slowly, carefully, with respect for the complexity of the situation, but forward. Together." "Together," Owen agreed. Inside the playroom, Sophie looked up and saw them standing close together, talking softly. She grinned and waved enthusiastically. Both adults waved back, laughing. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Blackwood Industries annual report made headlines across the business world. Despite implementing extensive employee welfare programs and significantly increasing wages, the company had posted record productivity and innovation metrics. Turnover had dropped by 73%, employee satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. The stock price had actually increased, as investors recognized that treating employees well created sustainable long-term value. But the report's final page was what captured public attention. a photo of Owen Blackwood standing beside Nina Castellano and a healthy, vibrant Sophie at the opening of the first Blackwood Community Health Center, a facility offering free medical care to company employees and their families. A year ago, Owen's statement read, "Our company's greatest weakness was treating people as resources rather than human beings. One employee's courage in the face of impossible circumstances taught me that real success isn't measured in profit margins, but in lives changed for the better." Today, Blackwood Industries stands as proof that compassionate capitalism isn't just possible, it's profitable. Nina's own statement appeared below. "I was once a janitor working 3 jobs, unable to afford treatment for my dying daughter. Today, I'm director of employee welfare at a company that's revolutionizing how corporations treat their workers. This transformation began with a simple plea. Please don't fire me, I have a sick child." And it changed not just my life, but thousands of others. Every employee deserves dignity, security, and the ability to care for their families without choosing work and the people they love. The article included a note that Nina Castellano and Owen Blackwood are now engaged, planning a quiet wedding after Sophie completed her final rounds of treatment. Dr. Hayes had declared Sophie cancer-free, though careful monitoring would continue. In the photo, Sophie stood between Nina and Owen, holding both their hands, her hair grown back thick and beautiful, her smile radiant with health and happiness. The caption read, "A family built on compassion, proving that the best business decisions are always human decisions." The movement Owen and Nina had started spread beyond Blackwood Industries. Other companies began implementing similar employee welfare programs. The concept of compassionate capitalism gained traction in business schools and boardrooms worldwide. But for Nina, Owen, and Sophie, the true victory was simpler and more profound. They had found each other in the darkness and had chosen to build something beautiful from pain. They had proven that seeing people, really seeing them, was the first step towards changing everything. And it had all started with a whispered plea in a corporate lobby and one man's decision to finally open his eyes.